Have you ever poured your heart into someone, only to feel like you've become invisible in their world? Hey there, I'm Eva, 65 and cozied up in Euphola, Alabama, where the lake sparkles and the air smells of magnolias. I'm here, sipping sweet tea, ready to share a story that's close to my heart, chatting with y'all, my dear friends, mostly ladies who've seen a few seasons like me. I'm stepping into the shoes of Eleanor Harper, a woman whose journey of love and loss will tug at your soul. I'll tell her tale as if it's my own, pouring every ounce of her courage and tears into these words. If her story moves you, subscribe to my channel and join our circle. Let's dive in Eleanor's waiting to speak through me, and I reckon you'll feel her heart beating right alongside yours. The sunlight spilled through the lace curtains of my little kitchen in Cary, North Carolina, painting golden patches on the worn oak table where I stood arranging pink roses from my garden. It was May, the air soft with the promise of summer, and I was fussing over a gift for my daughter-in-law, Lauren, a handcrafted ceramic tea set I'd splurged on at the Fearington Village Craft Fair. At 60, I still believed the right gift could mend a crack in a family, like a stitch in a frayed quilt. I'd been wrong about a lot of things, but that belief, that one hurt the most to let go of. I'm Eleanor Harper, and this is the story of how I found myself again, right here in this kitchen, on a Mother's Day I'll never forget. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your love was taken for granted, then you'll understand why I'm sharing this. Stick with me, because it's a story about losing everything you thought mattered and finding something better. The tea set gleamed under the light, its soft blue glaze catching my eye as I wrapped it in tissue paper. I'd spent more than I could afford on my fixed income, but I wanted Lauren to feel special. For years, I'd been trying to build a bridge to her, hoping one day she'd see me as more than just Michael's mother, more than the woman who paid their bills. Michael, my only son, and Lauren lived in a big brick house in Apex, a half-hour drive from my bungalow. I'd been helping with their mortgage for 18 months, ever since Michael lost his tech job in Research Triangle Park. The payments, $2,100 a month, took nearly half my savings, but I told myself it was worth it. It was for Michael, for my grandkids, Sophie and Liam. Family sticks together. Right. The phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me from my thoughts. Michael's name flashed on the screen, and my heart lifted. I wiped my hands on my apron, the one with faded daisies I'd worn since he was a boy, and answered. "Hey, honey," I said, keeping my voice bright. "Mom." Michael's voice was tight, like he was holding something back. "About tomorrow." I gripped the edge of the counter, the wood cool under my fingers. "What about it? I've got Lauren's gift ready. And I baked those lemon cookies the kids love." A long silence stretched between us, heavy as the humid Carolina air. "That's just it." "Mom," he said finally. "Lauren thought it'd be easier to keep it small this year. You know, family only." The words hit like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. "But I'm family, Michael. You know what I mean," he said, his voice dropping. "Just us and the kids. Lauren's parents are coming from Charlotte for the weekend." The roses on the table blurred before my eyes. Her parents, I swallowed hard, fighting the tremble in my throat. "I see. Well, I could just drop by, give Lauren her gift. I won't stay long." "Mom." "Please," he said, frustration creeping in. "Don't make this difficult. Lauren's been stressed with the house renovations and all. The house renovations. The house I'd been paying for. The house that drained my retirement fund month after month." I forced a smile he couldn't see. "I understand, honey," I said, though I didn't. Not really. After we hung up, I stood there, staring at the tea set wrapped in its tissue paper, the roses I'd so carefully arranged. I'd always believed families held tight, no matter what. That belief got me through the hardest days after my husband, Robert, died in '87, leaving me a 32-year-old widow with a 10-year-old son and a pile of bills. I picked up my car keys. I'd drive to Apex, leave the gift on their porch. What harm could that do? 20 minutes later, I pulled up to their 2-story colonial in Apex, the kind of house you see in magazines, with red brick and a manicured lawn. The street was quiet, kids' bikes scattered on driveways, the hum of a lawnmower in the distance. I was about to set the gift bag by the door when I heard Lauren's voice drifting through an open window. I froze. "No, Mom, don't worry about her showing up," Lauren said, her laugh sharp as broken glass. "I made sure Michael told her to stay away. She's not invited this year. Or any year. If I have my way." My breath caught. The gift bag clutched tight against my chest. I should have walked away, but my feet stayed rooted, like the old oak in my backyard. Lauren's voice went on, dripping with contempt. "You know what'd be a real Mother's Day gift when that old busybody finally ends up in a nursing home? That'd be worth celebrating." The bag slipped from my hands, hitting the concrete with a crash. The tea set shattered, pieces of blue ceramic glinting in the sunlight like fragments of my heart. I barely felt the sting as a shard nicked my finger when I bent to pick them up. That old busybody. The words echoed, each one a weight crushing my chest. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring the road, the radio playing some James Taylor song I couldn't hear. Back in my kitchen, I collapsed onto the sofa, the same one Robert and I bought when Michael was born. For years, I'd made excuses for Lauren. She was stressed. She was young. She'd warm up to me. I'd swallowed her snide comments at family dinners, pretended not to notice when she left me out of photos, all while I paid their mortgage, sent checks for Sophie and Liam's school funds, went without so they could have more. My gaze fell on the checkbook on the coffee table. The mortgage payment was due next week. I'd already written the check, $2,100, ready to mail on Monday. I picked it up, my hands trembling. That house in Apex, with its big windows and hardwood floors, wasn't mine. It was theirs. And yet, I'd poured everything into it, my savings, my dreams, my love. I thought of Lauren's laugh, her words about the nursing home. I thought of Michael, too ashamed or too weak to stand up for me. My fingers tightened around the check, and then, slowly, I tore it in half. The sound was soft, final, like a door closing. I didn't cry. For the first time in years, I felt something else freedom, sharp and terrifying. I called the bank, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'd like to stop a recurring payment," I said. The representative hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Mrs. Harper, you've been making this payment for over a year." "I'm sure," I said. "It stops today." When I hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at my rose garden. The blooms were vibrant, defiant, even after a long winter. I'd tended those roses for years, through storms and drought, just like I'd tended my family. But tonight, I realized something I deserved to tend to myself, too. Tomorrow was Mother's Day, and I'd spend it alone. But it would also be the first day of a new life, one where I'd no longer trade my dignity for a seat at a table that didn't want me. What would happen next? Would Lauren keep me from Sophie and Liam? Would Michael ever see me as more than a checkbook I didn't know? But as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Carrie, I felt a spark of hope, like the first note of a song I'd forgotten how to sing. This is just the beginning of my story, and I'm so glad you're here to hear it. If you've ever stood up for yourself or wished you could, I'd love for you to join me on this journey. Subscribe to my channel to follow along, and drop a comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from and if you've ever had a moment that changed everything. I can't wait to hear from you. The roses in my garden were still blooming the morning after I tore up that mortgage check. their pink petals catching the early light, like a quiet promise that life goes on. Even after everything changes. I stood at my kitchen window in Cary, North Carolina, a mug of Folgers coffee warming my hands, and tried to make sense of what I'd done. I'd stopped the payment that kept my son Michael and his wife, Lauren, in their big house in Apex. It wasn't just about the money, though. Lord knows $2 and $100 a month was half my income. It was about respect, about finally saying, enough. But as the quiet of my little bungalow settled around me, I couldn't help wondering, had I just pushed my family away for good? I'm Eleanor Harper. And if you're still here after hearing about that Mother's Day, that turned my world upside down, thank you. This part of my story isn't about the moment I stood up. It's about the years that led me there. The years I gave everything to the people I loved, only to find myself on the outside looking in. If you've ever poured your heart into someone and wondered if it was worth it, pull up a chair, let me take you back to where it all began. It was 1987, and the world felt like it had cracked open. My husband, Robert, had just turned 42 when he collapsed in our garage, a sudden heart attack stealing him away before I could even say goodbye. I was 32, standing in our Cary home with a 10-year-old Michael clinging to my side, his eyes wide with questions I didn't know how to answer. The house, a modest ranch with peeling paint and a leaky roof, was all we had left, but it came with a mortgage we couldn't afford and medical bills that piled up like autumn leaves. Robert's life insurance barely covered the funeral, a small service at a chapel in Raleigh with hymns he'd loved. I remember standing by his casket, whispering, "I'll keep our boys safe. Robert, I promise, to keep that promise." I took 2 jobs. By day, I was a secretary at a law firm in downtown Raleigh, typing letters and answering phones, the hum of typewriters filling the air. By night, I waited tables at a diner in Crabtree Valley Mall, the kind of place where the jukebox played Patsy Cline and the smell of fried chicken clung to your clothes. My feet ached, my back screamed, but I'd come home at midnight, check Michael's homework, and tuck him in before collapsing into bed. Some nights, I'd find him asleep with a flashlight, reading the Hardy Boys under the covers. I'd kiss his forehead and think, this is worth it. He's worth it. I'd always loved painting charcoal sketches and watercolors, dreams of art school that had once felt possible. My high school art teacher, Mr. Dawson, used to say I had a gift, that my landscapes of the Carolina coast could hang in galleries. But after Robert died, I packed my paints into a box and shoved it into the attic. There was no time for dreams when Michael needed new shoes, or the electric bill was overdue. I told myself I'd paint again someday, when things got easier. That day never came. By the time Michael was in high school, we'd settled into a rhythm. I'd cut back to one job, the secretary gig, because my knees couldn't handle waitressing anymore. Michael was a good kid, quiet but smart, always tinkering with computers in his room. I'd take him to Pullen Park on weekends, pushing him on the swings or splitting a snow cone while James Taylor played on the radio. Those were the moments I held on to, the ones that made the long hours and empty bank account feel worthwhile. When he got accepted to UNC Chapel Hill in 2003, I cried harder than I had at Robert's funeral. I took out a second mortgage on the house to pay his tuition, telling myself it was an investment in his future, our future. Michael met Lauren in his senior year at Chapel Hill, and at first, I was thrilled. She was studying marketing, all confidence and ambition, with golden hair and a smile that could light up a room. I thought she'd be good for him, someone to push him out of his quiet shell. When they got engaged in 2007, I invited them to dinner at my house, cooking Robert's favorite pot roast recipe in the hopes of making Lauren feel like family. She complimented the food, but her eyes scanned my outdated kitchen, lingering on the chipped linoleum and faded curtains. "It's cozy," she said, but her tone said something else. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just nervous. The wedding was the first crack in that hope. Lauren wanted a lavish affair at a historic venue in Durham, with chandeliers and a string quartet. I suggested something simpler, maybe a garden wedding in Kerry. But Lauren's smile tightened. "Eleanor, this is our special day," she said, her voice sweet but sharp. "Don't you want Michael to have the best?" Of course I did, so I withdrew $10,000 from my 401k, swallowing the penalties, to cover half the cost. I stood at the reception, my feet pinched in new heels, watching Lauren dance with Michael under twinkling lights. She looked like a princess, and he looked happier than I'd ever seen. I told myself it was worth it. After they married, the distance grew. Michael called less often, his visits to Carrie dwindling to holidays and quick drop-ins. When I went to their apartment in Raleigh, Lauren always had an excuse to cut things short: a headache, a meeting, plans she'd forgotten. But when they needed money, I was family again. In 2012, they wanted to buy a house in Apex, a colonial in a neighborhood with top schools for the kids they planned to have. Michael came to me, eyes downcast. "The bank won't give us the full loan." "Mom," he said, "it's the perfect house, in the best district for kids." I gave them $30,000 from my savings for the down payment, every penny I'd scraped together. When Sophie was born a year later, followed by Liam in 2017, I thought things would change. I'd knit blankets, bake cookies, drive to Apex to babysit whenever Lauren needed a break. But Lauren kept me at arm's length. She'd smile when I arrived, say, "Thanks, Eleanor," but her eyes were cold, like I was the hired help. She started forgetting to invite me to family events: Sophie's first birthday, Liam's preschool graduation. Once, I found out about a beach trip to Wrightsville from Lauren's Facebook post, pictures of them laughing in the sand while I sat home alone. The worst was the Christmas cards. Every year, I'd send Sophie and Liam cards with a little money tucked inside, notes telling them how much I loved them. One year, they came back marked wrong address. Though I'd lived in the same house for 20 years, I asked Michael about it, and he mumbled something about a mix-up. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew Lauren was behind it. Still, I kept giving. When Michael lost his job in 2023, part of the tech layoffs sweeping Research Triangle Park, they couldn't make the mortgage payments. Lauren refused to downsize. "The kids need this school district," she insisted, so I stepped in. I started paying the $2,100 a month, dipping into my retirement fund, telling myself it was temporary. Temporary turned into 18 months. Back in the present, the morning after that fateful Mother's Day, I sat at my kitchen table, the torn check still on the coffee table, like a badge of courage or recklessness. I wasn't sure which. I called my lawyer, Mrs. Carter, a no-nonsense woman I'd known since my secretary days. "Eleanor, you've got no legal obligation to keep paying that mortgage," she said, her voice crackling through the phone. "You've contributed over $150,000 to that house down payment. Payments, all of it. You could make a claim if it's sold or foreclosed." "Claim?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "You mean sue my own son?" "Not sue," she said gently. "Protect yourself. But think it over. This could change things with Michael." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the roses outside. I didn't want to fight Michael, didn't want to be the kind of mother who dragged her son to court. But Mrs. Carter's words stuck with me. Protect yourself. For years, I'd protected Michael, given him everything: my time, my money, my dreams. I'd paid for his college, his wedding, his house, all while Lauren treated me like a nuisance, and Michael stood by, silent. Had I been protecting him or enabling him? The question gnawed at me, sharp as the thorns on my roses. I thought back to 1987, to the promise I'd made to Robert. I'd kept Michael safe, given him a life Robert would have been proud of. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself. I'd stopped painting, stopped dreaming, stopped asking for anything in return. Lauren's words from yesterday, that old busybody, echoed in my mind. But they didn't sting as much now. They were her truth, not mine. I was more than a checkbook. More than a grandmother who baked cookies and stayed quiet. I was Eleanor Harper, and I deserved better. As I sipped my coffee, the phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. My heart skipped. But I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear his anger, or worse, his excuses. I needed time to figure out who I was without the weight of their expectations. Outside, a cardinal landed on my bird feeder, its red feathers bright against the green. I smiled, remembering how Robert used to call them Carolina's little flames. Maybe I could find my own flame again, too. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking the hours since I'd torn up that mortgage check and told the bank to stop the payments for Michael and Lauren's house in Apex. It was Monday now, the day after Mother's Day, and my little bungalow in Cary, North Carolina, felt quieter than ever. The roses outside my window stood tall, their petals catching the morning light, but inside, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. I'd stood up for myself, maybe for the first time in years. But at what cost would Michael understand? Or would he see me as the villain Lauren painted me to be? I'm Eleanor Harper, and if you've followed me this far, you know how it feels to give everything to the ones you love, only to find yourself pushed aside. This part of my story is about what happens when the truth comes out, when words are said that can't be unsaid, and when a family you've fought for starts to crumble. If you've ever had to face the people who hurt you, or wondered if standing your ground was worth the pain, stay with me. This is where the cracks in my world grew too wide to ignore. The phone rang just after 9. Michael's name flashing on the screen like a warning. I'd ignored his call yesterday, needing time to gather my thoughts, but I couldn't keep dodging him. I took a deep breath, the smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air, and answered. "Hello, Michael," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, what's going on?" His voice was sharp, edged with panic. "The bank called. They said the mortgage payment didn't go through. They're talking about foreclosure if we miss another one. Why would you do this?" I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with math homework 20 years ago. The wood was scratched, worn from years of use, much like me. "Michael." I heard what Lauren said. I said, my words careful but firm, about me, about wanting me in a nursing home. "I've been paying for your house for 18 months, and she thinks I'm a burden. I can't keep doing this." There was a long pause, the kind that feels like it's swallowing you whole. "You were eavesdropping," he said finally, his tone a mix of disbelief and accusation. "No," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "I came to drop off a gift for Lauren, and she was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Michael, she laughed about getting rid of me. And you didn't stop her. She didn't mean it," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She was just venting. You know how stressed she's been with the renovations. Stressed I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Michael, I've been paying $200 a month out of my retirement fund. I've gone without so you and Lauren could have that house. And all I get is her telling her mother I'm a busybody who needs to be locked away. That's not venting, that's disrespect." He sighed, and I could picture him running a hand through his hair, a habit he'd had since he was a boy. "Mom, we need that money. Without it, we can't make the payments. You can't just pull the rug out from under us because your feelings got hurt." My feelings got hurt. The word stung, reducing my pain to something petty, childish. I closed my eyes, the memory of Lauren's laugh echoing in my mind. "This isn't about my feelings, Michael," I said, my voice trembling but strong. It's about respect. I've given you everything, my savings, my time, my heart. And in return, you let Lauren treat me like I'm nothing. I'm done. Mom, please, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Let's talk about this in person. I'll come by tomorrow. Just don't do anything else until we figure this out. I agreed, but when I hung up, my chest felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a stone. I'd spent my life putting Michael first, working 2 jobs after Robert died, taking out loans for his college, giving up my dreams so he could have his. And now, he thought I was punishing him. I looked out at the garden, where a cardinal flitted between the roses, its red wings a burst of color against the green. I wanted to believe Michael would understand, but deep down, I feared he'd choose Lauren's side. The next morning, I was watering my roses when I heard a car pull up. It wasn't Michael's old Honda, it was Lauren's shiny SUV, gleaming under the Carolina sun. My stomach knotted as she stepped out, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her yoga pants and designer sunglasses screaming apex perfection. She didn't knock, just strode up to my porch like she owned it, her heels clicking on the wood. Eleanor, she said. Her voice clipped. We need to talk. I set down the watering can, wiping my hands on my apron. Come in, I said, leading her to the living room. The space felt smaller with her in it, her presence filling the air like a storm cloud. She didn't sit, just crossed her arms, her eyes scanning my outdated furniture with that same look she'd given my kitchen years ago. I know you're upset about Mother's Day, she began, her tone practiced, like she'd rehearsed this, but stopping the mortgage payment. That's childish. You're putting our family, your grandkids, in jeopardy over a misunderstanding. I stood by the sofa, my hands clasped to keep them from shaking. A misunderstanding, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Lauren, I heard you. You told your mother you'd celebrate when I'm in a nursing home. You called me a busybody. That's not a misunderstanding. That's how you feel. Her face tightened, but she didn't back down. You were spying on us, she said, her voice rising. What did you expect? Showing up uninvited, I was venting to my mom. You have no idea how hard it is to keep this family together, with Michael out of work and the kids needing so much. No idea. I stepped closer, my voice steady. Lauren, I raised Michael alone after his father died. I worked 2 jobs, 16 hours a day, to keep a roof over his head. I've paid your mortgage for 1.5 years, given up my savings, my security, so you could have that house. And you think I don't know what hard is? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or shame, but it vanished quickly. You offered to help, she snapped. We didn't force you, and now you're holding it over our heads because you didn't get an invitation to one dinner. That's low, Eleanor. Her words cut deep. But I held her gaze. This isn't about one dinner, I said. It's about years of being treated like I'm nothing. You forget to invite me to Sophie's birthday. You send back my Christmas cards. You keep me from my grandkids. I'm not just a checkbook. Lauren, I'm Michael's mother, and I deserve respect. She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. Respect, you think you're some saint because you give us money. I've tolerated you. Eleanor, always hovering, always wanting attention. Do you know how tiring that is? Michael was fine until you started playing the poor widow card. The door opened before I could respond, and Michael stepped in, his face pale. Lauren, that's enough, he said, his voice low but firm. I hadn't heard him sound like that in years. Lauren whirled on him. Oh, now you're taking her side. Your mother's trying to ruin us, Michael. She's using money to punish us because she's jealous of our family. Jealous, I said, my voice breaking. Lauren, I've given everything to your family. I've gone without so Sophie and Liam could have what I couldn't give Michael. And you think I'm jealous? Michael looked between us. His shoulders slumped. "Lauren, stop," he said. "Mum's right. We've taken her for granted. I should have said something sooner." Lauren's eyes widened, her face flushing. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "If you're so loyal to her, maybe you should move in with her." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael sank into an armchair, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know she said those things." "Mom," he whispered, "I swear I didn't." I wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too raw. "You didn't stop her." "Michael," I said softly, "you let her push me out, bit by bit, and I let you, because I thought that's what love meant. But I can't do it anymore." He looked up, his eyes red. "What do you want me to do? Sell the house? We'd lose everything in this market, the kids' school, their friends." "That's your choice," I said, surprised at my own firmness. "But I won't pay for a life that doesn't include me. I love you, Michael, but I have to love myself too." He nodded, but didn't speak. When he left, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat on the sofa, staring at a photo of Michael and me at Pullen Park, him grinning with a snow cone, me laughing in the summer sun. Where had that boy gone? The days that followed were a blur of silence. Michael didn't call, and I didn't expect him to. Lauren's words haunted me. But worse was the quiet. No giggles from Sophie. No stories from Liam. I'd always been their grandma, the one who baked cookies and read bedtime stories. But now I wondered if Lauren would keep them from me forever. One evening, I was sorting through a drawer when I found a stack of Christmas cards I'd sent the kids over the years, returned with wrong address scrawled across them. I held one, my handwriting still clear, to Sophie, my sunshine, love, grandma. It had never been opened. My throat tightened, and for the first time since Mother's Day, I let myself cry. The tears didn't last long. I'd learned long ago, after Robert died, that crying doesn't fix things. I called Margaret Coleman, an old friend from my secretary days who lived in Durham. We hadn't spoken much lately, but her voice was warm when she answered. "Eleanor, it's been too long," she said. "What's wrong? Can hear it in your voice." I told her everything, Lauren's words. Michael's vestiges of silence, the mortgage, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Oh, Eleanor," she said finally. "You've been carrying the world for them, but you can't make people love you the way you deserve. You've got to start living for you." Her words hit hard, like a splash of cold water. Living for me, I hadn't done that since I was a girl, dreaming of art school and painting the Carolina coast. I thanked her, promising to call again soon. As I hung up, I looked out at my rose garden, the blooms swaying in the evening breeze. Margaret was right. I'd spent my life giving, but maybe it was time to take something back myself. The roses in my carry garden were starting to fade as June rolled in, their petals curling at the edges like old love letters. I'd always thought of gardening as a kind of prayer, a way to tend to something fragile and make it grow. After the blow-up with Lauren and Michael, I needed that prayer more than ever. My kitchen, once filled with the hum of family plans, was quiet now. The phone silent since our confrontation. I'd stood up for myself, torn up that mortgage check for their Apex house, and told them I deserved respect. But the victory felt hollow when I was alone, wondering if I'd lost my son and grandkids for good. I'm Eleanor Harper, and if you're still here, you know how it feels to fight for your place in a family, only to find yourself on the outside. This part of my story isn't about the fight, it's about what came after. When I started picking up the pieces of myself I'd forgotten. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to start over, or if you could find joy in the small things after heartbreak, sit with me a while. Let me tell you how I found my colors again, right here in North Carolina. The idea to paint again came out of nowhere. like a cardinal landing on my feeder in the middle of a grey day. It was a week after Lauren stormed out of my house, her words, "You're jealous of our family," still ringing in my ears. I was tidying the spare room, a cluttered space where I kept old photos and Robert's books, when I found a dusty box in the corner. Inside was my old watercolor set, the wooden case cracked, but the paint still vibrant, tucked away since Michael was a boy. I ran my fingers over the brushes, their bristles stiff from years of neglect, and something stirred in me, a memory of who I used to be. Before I became just mom or grandma. I'd loved painting as a girl, sketching the Carolina coast in high school, dreaming of art school. My teacher, Mr. Dawson, had said my work had soul, but life got in the way. Robert's death, 2 jobs, Michael's needs. I'd packed my dreams away, telling myself there'd be time later. Now, at 60, later was here, and I was terrified. Could I still do it? Would my hands remember how to hold a brush? Or had I lost that part of myself forever? On impulse, I drove to an art supply store in downtown Raleigh, a little shop called the Artist's Loft, with creaky floors and the smell of turpentine. The owner, a woman about my age with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, helped me pick out a sketchbook, watercolors, and a small easel. Getting back into it, she asked, ringing up my purchases. After 40 years, I admitted, feeling foolish, I don't know if I've still got it in me. She smiled, handing me the bag. It's like riding a bike. Hon, your heart never forgets. Back home. I set up the easel by my kitchen window, overlooking the rose garden. My first strokes were shaky, the colors bleeding into a muddy mess. I laughed, a sound that surprised me, and kept going. By sunset, I'd painted a clumsy sketch of my roses, far from perfect but mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt light, like I'd opened a window in a stuffy room. I thought of Margaret Coleman, my old friend who'd told me to live for myself. Maybe this was what she meant. The next day, I saw a flyer at the Cary Community Centre for a watercolor class, 3 evenings a week. My stomach fluttered with nerves. In a class with strangers. At my age, but I signed up anyway. The first session was in an airy room with big windows, the tables covered in paint-splattered cloths. The instructor, a gentle man named Ellis with kind eyes, welcomed me like I belonged. Just let the colors guide you, he said. And I tried, my hand steadier with each stroke. By the end of the class, he held up my painting, a simple landscape of Lake Jordan, and said, "You've got a natural sense of composition. Eleanor, you've done this before, haven't you?" I nodded, too choked up to explain the decades I'd lost to duty. That night, I met Martha, a widow like me with a quick laugh and a love for bold colors. She invited me to join her and some friends for coffee at Bean and Barrel, a cozy cafe in Cary with mismatched chairs and the rich smell of roasted beans. Over lattes, Martha, Judith, and Doris pulled me into their world, talking about books, grandkids, and an art show coming up at a Raleigh gallery. "You should submit something." "Eleanor," Judith said, her eyes bright, "you've got talent." "Oh, I couldn't." I protested, my cheeks warming. "I'm just starting again." "We're all starting again at something," Martha said wisely. "That's the beauty of being our age. We get to decide who we are now." Their words stayed with me as I drove home. The Carolina sky streaked with pink and gold. Reinvention. At 60, it felt like a gift I hadn't known I could claim. I started painting every day, setting up my easel in the garden or by the window, capturing the curve of a rose petal or the shimmer of Lake Jordan. Each brushstroke felt like a step toward myself, a woman I was just beginning to know. One afternoon, as I was mixing colors for a new painting, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Sophie. My 12-year-old granddaughter, standing on my porch, her bike tipped over on the lawn. Her face was streaked with tears, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma," she said, her voice breaking, and threw her arms around me. "Sophie, honey," I gasped, hugging her tight, the smell of her strawberry shampoo filling my senses. "What's wrong? Does your dad know you're here?" She shook her head, wiping her eyes. "Mom and Dad are fighting all the time. About the house. About you. Mom said you don't want to see us anymore, but I knew that wasn't true." My heart sank. I led her inside, setting her backpack by the sofa. "Your mom's wrong, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I love you and Liam more than anything. I'd never stop wanting to see you." I made her hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, even though it was warm outside, because some hurts need comfort food. We sat at the kitchen table, and she told me everything: how Lauren cried about losing the house, how Michael was quiet and sad, how Sophie felt caught in the middle. "I heard Mom tell Aunt Sarah you're a controlling witch," she said, her voice small. "But you're not, Grandma. You're the best." Her words were a balm and a wound all at once. I squeezed her hand. "It's complicated, honey. Your mom and I, we don't always see eye to eye. But none of this is your fault, and I'm always here for you." Sophie nodded, sipping her cocoa. "Can I stay a little? I don't want to go home yet." "Of course," I said, my heart swelling. I showed her my paints, and we spent the afternoon sketching roses together, her careful lines surprising me with their grace. When Liam showed up an hour later, dropped off by a neighbor who'd seen Sophie's bike, he ran to me with a grin, holding a crumpled drawing of my garden. "I made this for you, Grandma," he said, and I hugged him, feeling whole for the first time in weeks. I called Michael to let him know the kids were with me. His voice was heavy with relief. "I'll come get them," he said. "Mom, I'm sorry about everything. Can we talk?" "Let them stay for dinner," I suggested, surprising myself with my boldness. "I'll bring them home after, and Michael Sophie's worried about you and Lauren fighting. She needs you to be strong." He paused, then said, "Okay, but Lauren won't like this." "She doesn't have to know," I said, my voice firm. Sophie came to me. That's what matters. Dinner was simple spaghetti with marinara, the kids' favorite, and a salad from my garden. Sophie chatted about school. Liam told me about a science project, and for a moment, it felt like the old days. Before Lauren's walls went up, after dinner, we baked cookies, the kitchen filled with the smell of vanilla and laughter. When Michael arrived, he looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed, but he hugged the kids tightly. "Go wait in the car," he told them. "I need to talk to Grandma." When they were gone, he stood in my living room, hands in his pockets. "I lost my job again," he said, his voice low, budget cuts. "And the house, we missed another payment, the bank sending foreclosure notices." I nodded, letting him talk. "Lauren's parents can't help," he went on. "Her dad lost his savings in some investment scam last year. They're barely scraping by. We'll have to sell. But the market's down. We might walk away with nothing." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, not sorry enough to open my checkbook, but sorry for the weight he carried. I thought of Lauren's polished exterior, her talk of her parents' success, and realized how much she'd hidden. Michael pulled an envelope from his pocket, his hands shaking. "I found these in Lauren's desk," he said. "I was looking for mortgage papers and, well, see for yourself." I opened it, my breath catching. Inside were Christmas cards, birthday cards, all from me to Sophie and Liam, unopened, some dating back years. My handwriting stared back at me. "To my dearest Liam, love, Grandma," and my eyes burned. She kept them from the kids. I whispered. She told Sophie I didn't want to see her. "I didn't know," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know. I looked at him. My son. So like Robert and his quiet guilt. What about the rest, I asked. The way Lauren talks to me, the forgotten invitations, the way she's pushed me out. Did you know about that? He looked away, his jaw tight, some of it. He admitted, I thought she'd warm up to you. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. It was easier to believe everything was fine. And now I pressed, my voice soft but steady. Now everything's falling apart, he said, sinking into a chair. Lauren blames me for not handling you better, for letting you cut us off. She says if I'd been a better son, we wouldn't be in this mess. The irony was almost too much. After all, I'd given $150,000 for their house. Years of sacrifice, he thought I was the problem. What do you want from me? Michael, I asked, my voice direct. I don't know, he said, his eyes meeting mine. I don't expect you to bail us out. I don't want to lose you. The kids need their grandma, and I need my mom. Need. The word hung between us, heavy with years of giving. I'd always been needed for money, for childcare, for silence. But what about love? What about respect? I didn't answer, just nodded. And he left with the kids, promising to call soon. As their car pulled away, I stood on the porch, the evening air soft against my skin. I thought of Sophie's sketch, Liam's drawing, and the paints waiting by my window. I wasn't alone, not really. I had myself, and maybe that was enough to start. The weeks that followed were a quiet kind of healing. I painted every day, my strokes growing bolder, my colours brighter. I joined Martha's art group, meeting weekly at the Cary Community Centre, where we shared stories and laughter over coffee and half-finished canvases. One evening, I brought a painting of Lake Jordan, its waters shimmering under a Carolina sky. Martha clapped when she saw it. Eleanor, you've got to show this at the Raleigh Art Fair, she said. You're not just painting, you're telling a story. I blushed, but her words lit something in me. I started sorting through my house, clearing out old clothes and papers, making room for the woman I was becoming. In a box of Robert's things, I found a photo of us at Pullen Park, Michael toddling between us, all of us laughing. I traced Robert's face, whispering, I'm trying. Robert, I'm trying to be me again. I hung the photo by my easel, a reminder that love doesn't mean losing yourself. One Saturday, I visited the Raleigh Art Fair, a bustling event with booths of pottery and paintings under white tents. I wandered, marveling at the colours, and on a whim, submitted my Lake Jordan painting for a community show. When I got a call a week later saying it had been accepted, I stood in my kitchen, stunned. The phone still in my hand. You did it. Eleanor, I whispered to myself, and for the first time in years, I felt proud not of what I'd given, but of what I'd created. As I set the phone down, I looked out at my garden, the roses now giving way to summer blooms. I'd lost so much, my savings, my place in Michael's family, my old self, but I was finding something new, something stronger. Sophie's smile, Liam's drawing, Martha's laughter, the weight of a paintbrush in my hand. They were threads in a new tapestry, one I was weaving for myself. I didn't know what would happen with Michael and Lauren, but I knew one thing: I wasn't invisible anymore. The summer sun hung low over my Cary garden, casting long shadows across the roses that had seen me through so many seasons of joy and sorrow. It was late June now, and my little bungalow in North Carolina felt alive again, filled with the hum of my new life paintbrushes drying by the sink, sketchbooks scattered on the table, the faint smell of turpentine mingling with fresh coffee. I'd found my way back to myself through art and friendship, but my heart still ached for my family. Michael's last visit, with Sophie and Liam's laughter filling my home, had given me hope. But the silence that followed was heavy. Could we mend what had been broken? Or had I pushed them too far when I stopped paying for their Apex house? I'm Eleanor Harper. And if you've stayed with me through the tears and triumphs, you know what it's like to fight for your worth, even when it hurts. This part of my story is about picking up the pieces not just for me, but for the family I'd nearly lost. If you've ever wondered if love can survive hard truths, or if forgiveness can coexist with boundaries, come sit with me. Let's see how a family can change, one honest word at a time. Michael's call came on a humid Tuesday morning, just as I was setting up my easel to paint the cardinals in my feeder. His voice was different this time, not angry, not pleading, but tired, like he'd been carrying a weight too long. "Mom, can I come over?" he asked. "We need to talk, just us." I agreed, my stomach knotting with a mix of hope and dread. When he arrived, he looked older than his 38 years, lines etched around his eyes, his shoulders slumped under a faded UNC t-shirt. He didn't sit, just stood in my living room, hands jammed in his pockets, staring at the watercolor of Lake Jordan I'd hung above the fireplace. "That's new," he said, his voice soft. "It's good." "Mom." "Thank you," I said, folding my arms to steady myself. "Coffee?" He shook his head. "I'm not here for coffee. I'm here about everything. The house, Lauren, the kids. It's all falling apart." I sat on the sofa, gesturing for him to join me. "Tell me," I said. My voice I'd learned long ago calm, inviting, even when my heart was racing. He sank into the armchair, running a hand through his hair. A gesture so like Robert's, it made my chest ache. "Lauren and I, we're done," he said, the words heavy. "We separated last week. I'm staying at a motel near Apex while I look for an apartment. The house, we can't save it. The bank's moving forward with foreclosure. We'll have to sell, but we'll lose money in this market. The kids are confused, asking why we're fighting, why you're not around." I listened, letting his words settle. Part of me hurt for him, for Sophie and Liam, caught in the middle. But another part, the part that had torn up that mortgage check, held firm. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, meaning it. "But Michael, I can't fix it for you, not this time." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I know, I don't expect you to. I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything. For not seeing how Lauren treated you. For taking your help for granted. I found more of your cards to the kids in her desk years worth. Mom, she kept them from Sophie and Liam, told them you didn't care. I didn't know, I swear." His voice broke, and I felt a pang, sharp and deep. I believed him not because I wanted to, but because I saw the guilt in his eyes. The same guilt Robert had when he'd forgotten an anniversary. "Why didn't you see it?" "Michael," I asked, my voice gentle but direct. The forgotten invitations, the way she talked to me, the way she pushed me out. You were there. He looked up, his face raw. "I was scared," he admitted, scared of losing her, of failing the kids. Lauren's always been intense. She wanted this perfect life, and I thought if I kept the peace, it'd work out. I told myself you were strong, that you could handle it. But I was wrong. I should have stood up for you. His words were a balm, soothing wounds I'd carried too long. But they didn't erase the hurt. I needed you to stand up for me. I said, my voice steady. Not just for me, but for Sophie and Liam. They deserve a father who shows them what respect looks like. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm trying. Mom, I want to be better for them. For you." I studied him, my son, so lost, and yet so familiar. I thought of the boy who'd clung to me after Robert died, the teenager I'd cheered for at soccer games, the man I'd given everything to. I loved him, always would. But love didn't mean erasing myself. "I've been talking to my lawyer," I said, choosing my words carefully. I've put $150,000 into your house down payment, mortgage payments. That gives me a financial stake. I could claim part of the sale proceeds, or..." His eyes widened. "Or what?" "Or I could help stop the foreclosure," I said, "in exchange for partial ownership. My name on the deed. Michael, not a loan, not a gift co-ownership, but there are conditions." He leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. "What conditions?" "First, I want regular access to Sophie and Liam, no more barriers, no more excuses. Second, I want respect, no more forgotten invitations, no more intercepted cards. And third, I said, holding his gaze, Lauren needs to apologize, not a performance, not for your sake, a real acknowledgement of how she's treated me." His face fell, the hope dimming. "Mom, she'll never do that. She's too proud. She'd rather lose the house than admit she's wrong." "Then we're at an impasse," I said, rising to show him out, "because I won't compromise on my dignity anymore. Michael, not even for you." He left, his shoulders heavy, and I stood on the porch, watching his car disappear down the quiet Kerry Street. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and I felt a strange calm. I'd drawn a line, and it felt right, even if it hurt. A few days later, I was deadheading roses in the garden when Sophie called, her voice bright through the phone. "Grandma, can I come over? I want to paint with you." I smiled, my heart lifting, and told her to bring Liam. Michael dropped them off that afternoon, lingering just long enough to say, "Thanks, Mom. I'll pick them up at 7. The kids filled my house with life. Sophie, now 12, set up a canvas by the window, her brow furrowed as she mixed blues for a sky. Liam, 8, sprawled on the floor, drawing a lopsided cardinal with crayons. "Grandma, look," he said, holding it up. "It's like the ones in your yard." "It's perfect," I said, ruffling his hair. I showed Sophie how to blend colors, her careful strokes reminding me of myself at her age. "You've got a gift, honey," I told her, and she beamed. "Over lemonade." Sophie grew quiet. "Grandma, are you and Dad fighting?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Is that why you're not helping with the house?" I set my glass down, choosing my words. "Your dad and I had a disagreement about how families should treat each other. I love him, and I love you and Liam. But I need to be treated with respect. That's not fighting, it's standing up for what's right." She nodded, then hugged me. "I'm glad you're my grandma," she whispered, and I held her close, blinking back tears. When Michael arrived, he looked less burdened, though still weary. "I'm filing for divorce," he said quietly. Once the kids were in the car, Lauren's moving to California with her sister. She wants the kids to stay with me, at least for now. I found an apartment in Morrisville. It's small, but it's a start. I nodded, processing the weight of his words. "And the house, it's gone," he said, his voice flat. "We'll sell before the bank takes it. I don't know what we'll get, but it's over." "I'm sorry," I said, and I was not for Lauren, but for him. For the dream he'd tried to hold on to. "What about the kids?" "They miss you," he said, meeting my eyes. "I want them to see you. Mom, no conditions, no barriers. I'm done letting anyone come between us." His words were a gift, one I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft. "That means more than you know." As he drove away, I stood in the garden, the roses glowing under the dusk. I thought of Lauren, her polished exterior cracking under the weight of her choices. I didn't hate her, not anymore. She'd built her life on appearances, and now it was crumbling. I hoped she'd find her own way, but I wouldn't carry her burdens again. A week later, I was painting in my kitchen when the mail arrived. Among the bills was a small envelope. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it, my breath catching as I read Eleanor. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong to push you out, to take your help and give nothing back. I grew up scared of being poor, and I let that fear make me cruel. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say this. Lauren. I read it twice, then set it down, my hands trembling. It wasn't the grand apology I'd wanted, but it was honest, raw. I thought of Lauren in California, starting over, maybe seeing herself clearly for the first time. I didn't need her remorse to move forward. I'd already found my peace. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. A quiet end to a painful chapter. Michael and the kids moved into a modest apartment in Morrisville, a far cry from the Apex Colonial, but warm with their laughter. I became a regular part of their lives again, picking Sophie up from school, helping Liam with science projects, teaching them both to plant bulbs in my garden. One evening, as we baked cookies, Sophie said, "Grandma, I'm glad you're back. It wasn't the same without you." "I'm glad too." "Honey," I said, kissing her forehead. I looked at Michael, rolling dough with Liam, and saw a man learning to stand on his own. He'd taken a lower-paying job at a small tech firm, but he was proud, saving for a house he could afford one day. "I'm doing this right. Mom," he told me later, "no handouts, no shortcuts. I want the kids to see that." I nodded, my heart full. "You're doing great. Michael, you always were." The healing wasn't just with my family, it was within me. I kept painting, my watercolors growing bolder, more confident. Martha and my art group became my anchors, their laughter and stories filling my days. One afternoon, I got a call from the Raleigh Art Fair. My Lake Jordan painting had won an honorable mention. I stood in my kitchen, the phone shaking in my hand, and laughed, a sound of pure joy. I wasn't just Eleanor, the mother, the grandmother. I was Eleanor, the artist, the woman who'd found her way back. As summer turned to fall, I sat in my garden, sketching the changing leaves. I thought of Robert, of the promise I'd kept to give Michael a future. I'd done that, but I'd also given myself one. The cracks in our family were mending, not with money or silence, but with truth and respect. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I'd face it with a brush in my hand and a heart that was finally my own. The first tulips of spring bloomed in my Cary garden, their red and yellow petals swaying like tiny flames under the North Carolina sun. It was Mother's Day again. A year since that shattering moment when I'd overheard Lauren's cruel words and tore up the mortgage check that had chained me to their Apex life. My kitchen was alive with the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, a recipe I'd perfected over the winter, and the soft hum of a James Taylor song on the radio. My little bungalow, once a place of quiet sorrow, now felt like a home mine, in every way that mattered. I'd found myself again, through paintbrushes and new friends. But the greatest gift was the family that had come back to me. Not because of what I gave, but because of who I was. I'm Eleanor Harper, and if you've walked this road with me, you know what it's like to lose your place in the world and fight to reclaim it. This is the end of my story, or maybe the beginning of a new one. It's about healing, about finding joy in the small things, and about learning that love means respect, not sacrifice. If you've ever wondered if it's too late to start over, or if a broken family can mend, sit with me one last time. Let's see how a new spring came to Cary, and how it might come for you too. The doorbell rang just after 10, and I smiled, knowing who it was. I opened the door to find Sophie and Liam, my grandkids, bursting in with hugs that nearly knocked me over. "Happy Mother's Day," Grandma Sophie said, her 12-year-old grin lighting up the room. Liam, 8, held out a wrapped package, his eyes bright. "We made it special for you." Behind them stood Michael, my son, his face softer than it had been in years, a sheepish smile tugging at his lips. Happy Mother's Day. Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. Something smells amazing. Cinnamon rolls, I said, taking the package from Liam. Your favorite. Come in, y'all. We settled in the living room, brighter now with my watercolor paintings on the walls, Lake Jordan, Pullen Park, my rose garden. So much had changed since last year. The Apex house was gone, sold in a foreclosure that left Michael and Lauren with little but lessons. They'd separated, then divorced, and Lauren had moved to California, chasing a new life. Michael had taken Sophie and Liam, moving them into a cozy apartment in Morrisville. And me, I'd become a grandmother again. Not a checkbook, but a real presence in their lives, teaching Sophie to paint, helping Liam plant bulbs, showing them love didn't come with a price tag. Open your gift, Grandma Sophie urged, bouncing on the sofa. I unwrapped the package, my breath catching as I pulled out a framed painting, a vibrant watercolor of Pullen Park. The carousel glowing under a Carolina sky. Sophie's signature was scrawled in the corner, proud and bold. I made it at school, she said, blushing. Dad helped frame it. It's perfect, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. Sophie, you're an artist, like you. Grandma, she said, hugging me tight. Michael caught my eye, his smile warm, and I felt a quiet pride not just for Sophie, but for us, for the family we'd rebuilt on truth. We hung the painting above the fireplace, next to my Lake Jordan piece, the two works side by side like a promise kept. The kids ran outside to play in the garden, their laughter carrying through the open window. Michael joined me in the kitchen, slicing strawberries for a salad while I checked the rolls. I got the promotion, he said casually, his knife pausing mid-cut. Michael, that's wonderful, I said. Turning to him, why didn't you tell me sooner? He shrugged, but I saw the pride in his stance. Wanted to save some good news for today. It's a step up. Better pay. I'm saving for a house. Mom, nothing fancy. Just something we can afford. No overreaching this time. I squeezed his arm, my heart full. I'm so proud of you, I said, meaning every word. He looked at me, his eyes steady. I couldn't have done it without you. Not the money, but you showed me what it means to stand up for yourself. I'm trying to teach the kids that, too. His words were a gift, one I'd waited years to hear. I thought of the boy I'd raised alone, the man who'd lost his way, and the father he was becoming. You're doing great, I said softly. We both are. Lunch was simple quiche, salad, those cinnamon rolls, served on my old mismatched plates. The kids set the table, Liam arranging dandelions they'd picked from the lawn in a small vase with the seriousness of a florist. Before we ate, Michael raised his glass of sparkling cider. To Mom, he said, his eyes meeting mine, for teaching us what matters. To Grandma Sophie and Liam chimed in, their glasses clinking against mine. I blinked back tears, raising my own glass, the moment settling into my heart like sunlight. After lunch, the kids helped Michael with the dishes, a new habit he was instilling, teaching them responsibility. I stepped onto the porch, the spring air soft with the scent of blooming azaleas. My garden was a riot of color, a testament to the care I'd poured into it, and into myself. Martha would pick me up soon for our weekly art group, a circle of women who'd become my lifeline, Martha through her retirement, Judith through her husband's illness, me through the reshaping of my family. My watercolors had grown confident, and a local gallery in Raleigh had agreed to show 3 of my pieces in their summer exhibition. It was a small victory, but it filled me with a quiet pride, the kind that comes from building something for yourself. I heard the front door open, and Michael joined me, handing me a fresh cup of tea. Happy, he asked, his voice simple but earnest. I looked at him, my son, who'd nearly lost himself but found his way back, who was learning. as I had. That love without respect isn't love at all. I thought of Sophie and Liam playing tag in the garden, their laughter a melody I'd feared I'd never hear again. Yes, I said, smiling, I'm happy. We sat in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun warming our faces. Inside, my latest painting waited on the easel, half finished, a sketch of the Carolina coast I'd dreamed of as a girl. Tomorrow, I'd add more color, more life. Tomorrow, I'd keep creating the life I wanted, today. It was enough to be here, present, respected, loved not for what I gave, but for who I was. Last week, a letter had arrived from Lauren, a brief apology for the years of hurt. I was wrong. Eleanor, she'd written. I let fear make me cruel. I'd read it, felt a flicker of compassion, but set it aside. Some bridges are better left as ashes, and I had no desire to rebuild that one. Her words were a closing note, not an invitation, and I was at peace with that. The kids' laughter pulled me back, and I watched them chase each other through the garden, their shadows dancing on the grass. Michael sipped his tea, his face relaxed, and I knew we'd be okay. The price of dignity had been high savings gone, a house lost, a family fractured, but oh, how worth it. I'd found my colors, my voice, my place, and no one could take that away. This is where my story ends, or maybe where it begins again. It's a story for anyone who's felt invisible, who's given too much and wondered if they're enough. If it's touched you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to my channel to hear more stories from the heart mine, and maybe yours. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from, and what moment in your life made you feel truly seen. Your stories matter, and I can't wait to read them. Thank you for being here, for reminding me that we're never alone in this beautiful, beautiful, messy thing called life.